I can't help you right now.
Okay.
Oh my God, you do see a picture. Uh-oh.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Just like wave if you can hear me.
Hey, Chris. It's Jason.
Hi. First of all, hello and welcome. I am Reverend Dr. Chris Davies, and I lead the Congregational Assessment, Support, and Advancement folks here at the National Setting of the United Church of Christ. And our hope with this webinar is to establish some intention of being really explicit about what we're thinking about and looking for and engaging for the New and Renewing Spiritual Communities grant. So what we are going to do is talk through some of that and then in questions in a communal way towards the end. So if you have specific questions about your project, there's actually a lot of learning for everyone that can happen in a setting like this. So before we begin, a couple of notes. One is that being recorded and will be available for anyone else to watch after in the process of their applications. And the second is that the slides that we're using will be emailed to those of you who registered via email afterwards. So if you are on the webinar now, you have a copy of the slides. If you are watching this after the fact, you will have to view the slides via watching it. So before we begin, I just want to introduce the rest of the team. So I'm going to invite my co-collaborator along the way, Roberto, if you'd like to say hello.
Hello, everybody. This is Roberto Choa. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm the program associate for Congregations of Color, and I'm really excited to be here with you all. Thank you for joining us today.
And Jennifer.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I am the program assistant here at the National Setting for Faith Formation in CASA. Yes, I get to do all your administrative stuff and help out in the background for things. So don't be afraid to holler if you need me, okay?
So even as you go through the process of application and the support all throughout that, you know, the three of us are your touch people at the National Setting to engage this work together. So as we move into content, I want to invite you into some Zoom webinar best practices. The first is that please keep your volume on mute throughout the course of the webinar. If it accidentally gets unmuted, we will likely we'll be able to kind of fix that on our end, but I'd rather not stop throughout the course of it to remind all throughout. If you have a question about what we are engaging, there's a little hand icon throughout there. For some of you, it might be at the top. For some of you, it might be at the bottom. If you can't see it, it might be in the ... more. And you can raise your virtual hand, which will indicate to us that you have a question. And Jennifer White, via the chat box, will reach out to you privately and compile those questions and/or assure you we will get to them throughout the course of what we're doing. At the end, there's a big chunk of time that we're going to engage direct questions. We have about an hour and a half set aside. I don't anticipate the content to take that long. The questions, however, there is that much time to engage them as needed. So as I said before, we're in the process of recording the webinar and slides will be emailed afterwards. And now that we have your emails, we're also going to bump you with reminders for the next few webinars, which are on July 25th, which is about preparing SMART goals and working with the budget, and then some general FAQs as we approach the deadline in August. So those are the options that are available to you and available to all who are considering applying for this grant. What we are committed to the best of our ability, is to make sure that we get everyone up to the same point to start. We're aware that there are multiple points of access into this application process and into the outcomes that we're hoping for, and we're also aware that it's very competitive. So with an awareness of all of that, in conversation with our values as the United Church of Christ and with intention and equity, we are hoping to grant with our missional resources towards making the biggest impact we can in local communities and churches. So to be upfront about that now, that's what we're hoping. So as we move into the grant program itself.
So just for us to, just a quick reminder of who is actually eligible for the New and Renewing Spiritual Communities grant. This grant is available to all faith communities affiliated with the United Church of Christ. If the applicant is not a member in discernment or UCC minister in good standing, a UCC accountability structure must be described and agreed upon to the local conference or committee of ministry. So I would recommend that if you don't have a pastoral leader that is recognized within your association or conference, that you immediately probably have a good conversation to be sponsored by your local conference, who can assist your congregation or your ministry in how to, who can assist you with being your advocate for this process. Your local UCC conference should be familiar with your ministry. There is a $100,000 lifetime cap on what congregation can receive from this program.
Where I could build.
Next screen. For new spiritual communities, a new spiritual community or a church plant is often starting from the beginning. That's how we're defining new spiritual communities. Going through the channels within your conference, whatever systems are in place in how new churches started, or a outreach. Or if there's an existing congregation, they are creating something new outside of the institutional supports of local churches. Meaning, for instance, if they are being planted like a table church or some sort of ministry outside with a gear mission, with a specific mission or vision, that supports that's getting supported by local churches. Also, new spiritual communities are those defined that are under 10 years old, and they also could have some connection to UCC churches nearby, and yet the leadership will be distinct. Okay, so I'm gonna refer to Chris on this one, on that last point.
So how, sometimes there are existing congregations that seek to plant a new congregation from where they are. And a new spiritual community, one of the ways we will know it's distinct is that the leadership is distinct. So if the senior pastor of the existing congregation is the leadership of the new project, then it would be more a project of renewal as opposed to a new spiritual community. Moving into renewing congregations are congregational structures that are trying to do a new thing from within the context of their congregations. Usually there's already a board. There are accountability structures set up. So if you have to approach your board to say, we want to do this project, it's a clue that you're working probably with more of a renewing congregational situation. And with that, specifically, the evaluation team will be seeking to see how the new project is supported by the congregation. That's not only, but it is particularly financially. For example, if you're renewing project working with a congregation that has an endowment attached to the congregation, we don't expect, that's not not necessarily a problem, but what we will want to see is how the congregation is investing in the new project or the project of renewal. There has to be some sort of self-investment first. If the project is one wherein folk are drawing on an endowment to do that, or if they are, let me rephrase, if they are not drawing on an endowment to invest in a project of renewal, then the question that comes often from the folks evaluating is what makes the pool of money we have access to different from the pool of money that you have access to already. So it's a question of existing congregations and their leadership to engage their endowment policies or how that works. So endowments do not immediately disqualify folk from receiving grants. What we'd want to see very clearly is how the congregation is investing in the project of renewal at all levels, financially, leadership, excitement, etc. So if what we're engaging is a project of renewal, then it has an impact of renewal on the whole congregation. And having said that, sometimes we see applications come through that are very specifically for projects of renewal that end up being more building related projects. Like, we need a new sound system, so we're going to do this grant in such a way that will be included in that. And with those, we do a lot of referring of building related grant asks to the Church Building and Loan Fund. There are different ways in which the denomination can support and invest in the projects they.
Hey, Chris, it looks like your audio dipped out for a second. All right, I can see your video. There you are. Let me unmute you. Try again. How about that?
Where did we leave off?
Go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about church building and loan.
Great. My apologies. We refer a lot of that to church building and loan, and we're happy to make that connection for you to see if maybe they're more apt to be able to help. For many missional projects, even outside the grants, that's another way of accessing the resources available to you, particularly for congregations that are doing renewing projects and systems. So I'm happy to help you after the webinar if you want to talk to them, even in conversation as you're applying for what you're thinking through now. Details. It's blurry between those two because we are in a moment of church where, some things feel very clear and some things are a little bit not. So apply for and make that distinction for what best fits your community. If your church is, still in the very beginning stages, not necessarily but maybe a little bit older than 10 years old, then apply for new if that makes more sense. If your congregation is supporting a project of renewal and you can identify a separate leadership team that are engaging and seek to break off from what you're doing and become their own thing at some point, it's what fits best for you, and holding trust between, we trust you to know what you are doing, and invite your trust in the evaluation team to hold that in intention and grace for what we hope to do together for the sake of the gospel. So having said that, in particular, when it comes to matching grant requirements, there are two kinds of grants that you can apply for. The first is a grant that is really meant to help the project or the ministry get on its feet. The spiritual community probably does not have the capacity to do the work of essentially what we heard from the team who pulled this together, of fundraising immediately for this. So if you are at a point where you're got to set up where we are and then we can leap to the next level, then that would be the non-matching grant that is lesser in quantity, but that is the purpose for what that's present for. There's also the matching grant, which is up to 40 grand, wherein, you get a chunk up at the front, and then you have the opportunity to get the rest via either a 2-to-1 or a 1-to-1 raise, based on the evaluation team's recommendations. And the matching requirements for new communities are different than established communities, in that for renewing congregations or established communities, normal tithes and business expenses that are already established do not count towards the match. So what that means is that if you're an existing congregation and the tithes that come in specifically Sunday for operating expenses or whatever else don't count towards the match. What does count towards the match for existing congregations is things that are done specifically in alignment with the project of renewal that you're working with, or the project that you're working with, or the matching grant. So if someone, for example, writes you a check and says, this is to go towards the matching grant, it does. But if it's normal operating expenses, it's not. You can do fundraisers, you can get creative, how you raise money for your match. What we are looking for is how that process is able to help carry you into a sustaining community. So, that has some wiggle room on it, but if, what does not count for either new spiritual communities or renewing congregations is a match of another grant. So you can't use, which is a little bit different than how it has been in the past, given the purpose of the matching grant is you can't match a national grant with a conference grant, for example. And the evaluation team will take very seriously what your mission, vision, and your goals are. And based on what you say, they'll be engaging your application in conversation with itself. For example, if one of the values that you lift up in your application is we want this to be a project, we anticipate that we will be here in a generation to do this work, then they might push you a little harder for, well, how are you going to sustain? That might be a cue for more of a match. So that just to know that in your application. The next webinar is really going to engage SMART goals and budgeting, and kind of telling the story of through your budget and through your goals. And to that, if you want more information, you'll both get an email because you've given us your email addresses now, and it's right here on the screen. So that'll be July 25th at this. And note that if you are rewarded, if we are investing in your ministry via a grant, that coaching is a requirement. And we will be attentive to that process and match in some way how you with someone who will help you think through that which is and can be, and kind of get your work on the ground. We are in the process of figuring out how to do that to excellence, and are researching different options for that as well. So as with many things, we're learning in the air, and we'll do our best for that.
And as Chris says, the evaluation team is going to be looking particularly paying close attention to the mission and vision of the project, or the ministry rather. And they're going to be looking for strong and succinct mission and vision statements. And we're going to be here to talk a little bit about how to write strong mission and vision goals for your ministries. The mission and vision statement of your ministry can be different than that of your church. So you can be creative here, you could be thinking outside the box, and whatever the ministry, but something that clearly communicates what the vision is, what the mission vision is of the ministry. We recommend that you err on specifics and tangibles rather than be fluffy. Using strong, clear statements that gives us an idea of what the ministry is about. Chris is going to talk about, we're going to show some examples of what strong mission statements look like. Chris.
So about this, particularly for renewing congregations, we have the note in here about the mission and vision of the ministry that is different than that of your church, because often a church will have something that's vague enough to do what it needs to do and, you know, strong enough to hold it. Or a church might have a mission statement that's 4 paragraphs long. Or a church might have a mission statement that is, you know, centered on the faith of it as we are collectively, but kind of vague in the details. So I just want to name that for this project, we're not looking for the mission statement of the church, although this may be helpful as you think with intention about your church strategic leading and planning as well. So
sure. That's the plan too. And
so if you have a question, Jennifer, just relay it to Jennifer, and she will either inform you where it will come, if it's coming, or hold it until it's time. So, and we're muting along the way, just to reiterate our beginning. So thinking through mission statement, the mission statement is an invitation into your purpose. It's a how will you go about doing what your ministry is called to do. And so, you know, I pulled up the mission statement of the United Church of Christ, which has somehow, and it also has that, you know, the church specific language of this can hold what we need to do. United in spirit and inspired by God's grace, we welcome all, love all, and seek justice for all. There's verbs in there. It's an action. It's how we hope to do this as a denomination. Bold, impactful mission statements are what the evaluation team will be looking for. And before I go into this, I just want to say a note about the evaluation team. The evaluation team is made up of leaders across our denomination who are doing the work of church renewal and church planting, or they are conference leaders and staff or lay folk invested in this work. We're very attentive in the evaluation team in pulling together people who are able to understand the vastness. Can you hear me? Okay. And how that will also happen is that we do.
Okay, Chris, you're cutting in and out.
Conversation.
Try that right back where you just started again. Try that one more time for us, please.
That the and I'll pause, but so the evaluation team, we do some equity training with them before they begin too, so that they are engaging what they see with intention, grace, equity, and bold, impactful mission statements. It has language that is recognizable for the people is specific. It can be spoken out loud and is often something that people can use to measure against the tasks that they're working with. In terms of mission statements that are unclear, it generally has insider language or jargon, can be very long, is vague or forgotten or full of clauses, and may become irrelevant at some point. So that gives us some kind of, here it goes. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to show you some impactful mission statements from various nonprofits. And then at the end of that, if you have a mission statement that you are brave enough or vulnerable enough to bring into this space, I'm going to switch out of the PowerPoint and invite a group conversation so that the wisdom in this space can invite some suggestions or affirmations or questions about that. So if you're feeling that call, just think through that or pull it up, and we will do the same for a vision statement when we get there. Here are some mission statements that are succinct and impactful. So I just want you to, look through this list, think about one of them. Hold it, and if you need to write it down, I've got 2 more slides that show more, and they're gonna range from the shortest to the longest, and we can see how they do in conversation with what we presented. There's some more. And here. See the long, and the source is down at the bottom if you're interested in looking clearer. So what are some of the things that you have noticed or that you're thinking about in conversation with a mission statement specifically? So if you are muted, now's a good, you can unmute yourself and participate in a group conversation.
There, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yep.
Oh, good. Hi, I'm Angela Jernigan, ordained through the UCC in 2012 for a community-based ministry serving children, youth, and families in Berkeley, California. And we're looking to expand our work under a new umbrella. And I've been really wrestling with our mission statement, so I'm not sure if this is the time in this conversation to try to raise that, but I would love any help that anybody can offer in terms of helping us get to a really succinct, powerful one. So is this the moment for that?
It can be. Why don't you speak what you have, also put it into the chat function, and then I'm going to invite from the group. I'll put back up the slide I had with the different options on it, and we'll take about 7 minutes total. So you can say, for the group participating, you can say your name, but your name to introduce yourself, but you don't, more than that will take more time. So your name and then the contribution you have for Angela. Sound good?
I think so. I think I get it. I actually don't have it typed up in a shareable way in chat. Can I say it verbally, or shall I stop and type it in and have somebody else go first?
You say it, I'll type it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. We are the Family Spirit Center, making new connections, healing old divisions, and incubating innovative solutions on behalf of Berkeley kids.
So this is the time for those of you participating to hop in with your thoughts.
Am I supposed to be seeing something or hearing something?
This is Jason. Are you hearing anything?
Oh, I wasn't hearing anything. No.
Okay.
I'd be curious. Let's see where. I heard you for a second.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Great.
Who
One of
is
the things I
speaking?
notice is that it takes a while to get to your target population. We don't hear the word kids until the very end. And it would be helpful to me as someone who'd never heard your mission before to encounter right up front what's the population of people that this mission is working with, for, and about? And then tell me the things that you're doing in terms of connecting or overcoming old wounds. But then I have a subject around which I can focus early in your mission.
Fabulous. Thank you. That's great.
You bet.
I'm going to invite maybe one or two either suggestions or affirmations. It's a big risk to come into a space like this and show up with this vulnerability. So if you even want to affirm that for Angela, I think that would be amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll speak. Am I being heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I like that mission statement a lot. I like the focus on kids. But my question is generally about mission statements. Should they be addressing the evaluators, the congregations that are originating, or should they be addressing the people, in this case, kids, I suppose, or parents or caretakers of kids who are going to be benefiting from the grant?
Great question.
So what we are looking for is a little bit of all, that's part of why a mission statement is kind of short and succinct. But leaning more towards the constituency group than the insider language. So the mission statement teaches people who you are so that they can align yourself with your work. It doesn't necessarily speak internal to the congregation or the community who already have some idea of who we are. So that's, speaking about the insider outsider language. The evaluation team is looking at it from that perspective. So you don't have to orient towards the evaluation team. What they will be seeking is how you orient towards your communities.
Mm-hmm. So in light of that, I am thinking that this is oriented toward the community leaders and parents who we're hoping to draw and serve. And I'm wondering if that is fitting. Not so much to the kids themselves, although older youth will probably hop right on board with their leadership if we're lucky, but more to community leaders and parents.
Yep.
Okay.
So any other thoughts or affirmations for Angela moving forward? All right, can we just if you are on the screen and you can see yourself, just wave and send her some grace and gratitude for stepping into that space.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
I'm going to hop back in to where we were. So on the questions to consider as you engage your mission statement, is that some of what it does is, why does this ministry or project exist? What is this? What is it towards? And there is some connection between a mission statement and a theory of change, which I will swing back to more concretely in just a few minutes. So this is about the how of how you achieve your vision. It has the verbs, the actions, the intentions, and it correlates in some with SMART goals, which, for more information, there's another webinar on July 25th. On the thinking this through, what is your mission statement? How is that in conversation with the hope? For how this is actually what it looks like on the application. That's the question. And it's succinct. 300 words to get it in there, which may be even too many, but we wanted to make sure there was enough space for that. Thinking through vision.
And Chris, talking about visions, how a vision statement is what the community can look for. Oh, I'm sorry. A vision statement is what the community can look like as a result of the impact of your ministry. So the mission, the vision is that which, gives some sort of idea of how this is going to impact the ministry to the world outside. Right, Chris?
So vision statements are aspirational. A vision statement, it leans into the future and paints a picture of what the world can be like as a result of the ministry. It inspires, it evokes emotion. It is also short. Unclear would be generic, non-specific. It describes more of the process, not the outcome. It can be bland or uninspiring, or it relies on plentiful, incredible, amazing, supportive superlatives for the power in it instead of necessarily the action and the power. So in terms of vision statements, particularly the aspirational, the future leaning, what does it look like when we've got it? I was just, as an aside, I was just at a training with a visionary leader who does work of shaping change in worlds. She's her name is Adrienne Marie Brown, and she works out of Detroit, and she leans on Octavia Butler and what she calls biomimicry, that people evolve the way of the world evolves, into her change theory, her theory of change. And one of the things that she says is that if we are seeking to create change in some capacity to evolve, if change is constant, then we have to be able to vision beyond what we know. We have to be able to use our imagination into that vision statement, even in the aspirational place. So I bring that in with a nod of gratitude for her work and the community she's supporting and engaging and shaping. So here are some example vision statements. Some of them are even reflective of thinking about ours, the United Church of Christ. We are united in Christ's love. We imagine a just world for all. And that shows up here in a couple of different ways, like Oxfam. But I wanted to show these with you to show the future orientation, the aspirational. It's not a place at which we arrive. It's a place where we continue to shape so that we can engage what could be. Here's some more. So kind of showing that. And again, that you can find more of these or engage it on the website listed below. So when you are engaging and thinking through your vision statement, some things to think about are, how will the world be changed as a result of your ministry? Are you transforming lives? Are you engaging isolation? Are you, doing the work of engaging systems with your community for the sake of change or the gospel, or how we engage that? What is the impact that you have on the people who come, the people who are present, in whatever way that is, whether that's gathered incarnate or online, or any or all of that imagination place. And we'll be thinking through too the connection between the vision and a theory of change. So a theory of change is, because we do this will happen. Because we are doing what we are doing, how will the world be different? So it's engaging that how. So I reached out to Reverend Dr. John Dorhauer and asked him about the theory of change for the United Church of Christ, if we are seeking to lean towards a just world for all. And he affirmed that by empowering local congregations, curating their narratives of impact, building networks to facilitate their commitments to the gospel, the UCC national setting is bringing about a vision of what justice looks like in local contexts. We impact local congregations, we amplify and tell their stories further, and we inspire further change across the denomination towards a just world for all. So that's a theory of change, which is, that's more of an internal. It's something for you to be in conversation with for your ministry or church or beyond. It can be an internal document, though. It's not necessarily one that goes outward. It's for you to measure what and how you are doing. along the way. So thinking through vision, is there someone who's feeling called to lean into the brave space of sharing a vision for what they're doing? So this is a space of bravery, not necessarily critique, but how we communally are, we are all seeking to lean towards that which is aspirational. But, what does it look like? Even if you're not at the point of writing it, just invite you to share what it looks like when your dream is actualized. All right. So with that awareness, I invite you to kind of just sit in that space, or give yourself permission to sit in that space. Maybe not now, but at some point, if you are doing what you are doing, what is the world that you are visioning? What is the change that you can see? Is it the day that all feel connected? Is it the day that, thinking through the mission statement that was offered before, is it the day where all kids are connected into mentor networks, or however that change is to happen? Just think through that, dream it, vision it, journal it, draw it, sing it, but invite that into your intentionality of what you're doing. So I offer that with grace. And Angela, you have your hand raised. Oh, you're muted.
I couldn't raise my hand before. I'd be happy to offer the clunky vision statement I have right now if you want the continuity for the conversation. But I don't feel a need to necessarily. If you're just looking for one to workshop, I'm happy to offer it up.
If you are feeling called to, I will lean into that. The hope is that this is a space of doing that work in a communal place, rather than, instead of many people reaching out to our office for individual help, we're trying to establish a continuity of relationship and community, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, no problem.
So I'm going to move on and talk through very briefly just the theory of change. In the application, we'll see some of that in these two questions. What is the specific opportunity or possibility this ministry is seeking to engage? And you'll see some of the mission statement will tie in there. Because if the mission statement is the how language, it helps engage that question. Or in entrepreneurial language, one of my colleagues in this work, Rabbi Ilan Babchuk, asks people, what is the problem you're seeking to solve? And do you love the problem more than your specific solution? Which I think is like a great question for churches, especially churches that are seeking to, and spiritual communities seeking to do something new. What is that problem or possibility or opportunity that you want to engage in? Is it a community that is underserved, that wherein faith is doing things in a different way, or the congregations leaning into gospel work are meeting people where they actually are in a different way than, kind of institutional churches? Or is it that the place of faith working in the arm of the congregation is through this project that we're working on together that's pulling people in, and here's how it ties in. And then the second question is, how will this ministry create and sustain the possibility envisioned? So this is really like the how question. You can get you touch on it in the mission statement, but it comes back in here. Like, this is the actual theory of, if we do this, then this will happen, this vision statement, this aspirational thing that as a result of doing this, we will be. And it could be that, particularly for newer communities, that the vision is that we are a sustaining community of faith. It can be just as succinct as that this community of faith serves people who, show up consistently and, reaches out to people to bring them into the gospel and into the work that we're doing together as a church. But it's the how question. We will do it in this kind of way. There are, if you think through theory of change, or if you Google that, there's a lot of different resources on it out there. It is a small part of this conversation, but again, similar to the visioning of what can be on a personal, prayerful way, the theory of change is a way of kind of testing that. So especially if you are a project that is applying for investment from the national in the work that you're trying to do, this is actually, I think, my next slide. I'm moving on. Yeah, there it is. How will you measure that? How will you know that your theory of change is showing up and accurate along the way? So this is a very, very brief primer on thinking through strategic visioning in a logic model, which starts at the end. What's that vision statement? So you can kind of see in this orange box to the right, it starts at the end, the picture of what can be, and then goes back to here's what we have now for inputs. Here's the how, the tasks, the programs, the change making, the what you do. And then the outputs are measurable differences. How do you know that you are making a change towards that vision? So this question here shows up on the application like this. Other than SMART goals, if your ministry has metrics that help assess whether or not this is effective, we invite you to describe them. So for example, I heard of a congregation in Texas that had a vision that they would really engage joy. They wanted to bring more joy into their community. And one of the creative metrics that this community thought of was people are having more parties. So they started at the beginning with, like, I think it was a sermon series or something like that. And they asked people, how many parties are you hosting? Or in a bunch of other questions. And then, like, whatever amount of time later, they asked the same question and they could see a measurable difference. So there's some nuancing of that. The point is that outputs or measurable differences are that's what you imagine for yourself. How do you know that you're doing what you hoped that you could do? And one of the benefits of metrics that you make for yourself is that even if it's especially if it's non-traditional metrics, it helps us see change. So if we're moving away from the metrics of how many butts are in the seats and how many bucks are coming in, what then do we lean into? We got this many referrals from people who are not in the community. We had this many thank you notes with appreciation, or they're measurable and creative outputs. If you want more information on how to do this in a congregational setting, the national setting has a resource that was developed by Christina Lazardi-Hajbi based on the Be the Church banner that teaches strategic visioning in conversation with the logic model for congregations. And it's available free online at ucc.org/bethechurch. And that will be in the email. That link will be in the email that comes out with the slides as well, just in case you missed it in this go around. So that kind of teaches this in a succinct and mission-oriented way. So what you are applying for is in this section here, the task, the program, the change making, and then we're just the arrow. I forgot the arrow. So then we're kind of, the application helps engage all these questions in a logic model that, that helps the evaluation team, those who are evaluating, see that even if it's not necessarily something that the community is engaging in directly, the questions help us see this. Having said that, I just want to say that before we go into questions, if you have any other questions, I am available. That is my email address. If you're thinking of a question that's pretty specific, I really do invite that you ask it in this space, because if you're thinking it, it's likely that other people have that as well, and we can learn together and support each other in this and making connections cross projects, even as we go through the application process as a whole. So if you have a question, I'm going to shift out of the screen share and to a communal space, and we can have a conversation about that.
So this is Beth. Is this a good time to ask the question?
Yes, go ahead and ask your questions.
Okay. I'm not sure if you can see me, but I'm having a little trouble with my camera, but hopefully you can hear me. I'm Beth Norcross. I'm working with UCC pastor Sarah Anders in developing a Church in the Wild here in the DC area. And I was just wondering how many typically grant applications you receive in a given year, and how many you typically are able to grant, and is there a graduated grant, or is it strictly a $20,000 grant?
Great question. So this process is in transition as a whole, and there's a report available about the whole of it at ucc.org/what's new, which we'll put in the chat box as well. Last year, we got about 80 applications and we granted 12. I anticipate that we will get more applications this year. So I know that it will be a competitive grant. So I encourage you to also seek communal support and other funding sources. One of the questions on the application is, where else are you looking? And after the grant application period is over, I compile that and we'll write that up into another report as well, to see, not only where else are people seeking funding and how else are people doing this really important work. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, and and maybe I should wait and ask this question on the budget time next time, but are they $20,000 grants, or do you sometimes give less?
That's a great question. It is up to $20,000, and on the application we ask how much are you seeking, and it should correlate with the budget.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, and then I see a question on the chat. If we're applying for this grant in order to sustain our community of faith in our section of town or association, would we be in the ballpark, or do we need to have a specific mission or program? So for Barbara, that question is, that would really depend on your theory of change. So, if what you're trying to do is keep going the way that you have been going, how will that impact your local community? If we need money to fill this gap in our budget, it's not likely that is an investment of missional resources that we can do with intention and impact on behalf of the denomination. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific mission or program. What it does have to do is indicate how this is different than what has already been. We are going to do, I'm trying to think of an example of what that might be. We will be intentional about a project of renewal that includes doing a prayerful neighborhood walk and engaging the community deeply, and then listening to what we've learned. So sometimes congregations will reach out into the community, bring it back in, and talk about it for 2 years and do nothing with it. So like what we'd be looking for in a case like that is how how does the theory of change, or how is what you're applying for will get to what you hope to be? Are there, yeah, any more questions?
I have another one, but I want everybody to have a chance to get in here before I ask another question.
I have a question.
Okay.
This is Ann Troy. I'm a retired UCC pastor, and I live in Hawaii on Maui. And our church, which is pretty small, has been trying to build 60 units of affordable housing on Maui, where local people can't even afford to rent an apartment or buy a home. They're never going to be able to because of the high cost of living here. And so I saw the slide that said, well, some projects are going to be more appropriate for the church building and loan fund. We have a loan from the Cornerstone Fund. Mm-hmm. And we have written grants over the last 2 or 3 years and gotten about $350,000 in pre-development costs.
Yep.
But now we want to move to the next step. We think we have a partnership with a local developer. We want to break ground within the next year, but we lack about $100,000 to get to the next step. Is this an application we can make to CASA?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a maybe, and probably not. Based on what you've said, I would probably refer you to Church Building and Loan, and they work very closely with Cornerstone. So we're not, like, the CASA loan is not granting for the purpose of building, although, you know, you could, maybe. It's a solid maybe. I think that would rest in the hands of the evaluation team and beyond. So
we're not asking for costs for building. We're asking for costs to complete the pre-development. These are the consultants like the architect, the structural engineer, all the kinds of things that you have to do before you put a shovel into the ground. Sure. And I have been in conversation with Patrick Dugan with the Church Building and Loan Fund, but they only make loans. They don't make grants.
Right.
And so that's why I want to apply for a CASA grant. We already have a loan from the Cornerstone, fund.
Yeah.
And we're paying on that.
Yeah, I think that's really a solid maybe. And I can nuance that more a little bit with you after.
Okay, sure.
Because the grants really are for spiritual communities and the renewing of congregations. It depends. It depends on a lot of factors, or how the churches or spiritual communities are in development or being made or beyond. So let's figure out a time to talk that through with more specifics. With the information that you've said in this space, I would say maybe, probably not.
Okay.
And then a question in the chat: on average, how long are successful applications? Like, are you talking about word count? Or are you talking about the grant period or something different? I'll answer word count. So each of the questions has a maximum word count in it, and they should be they have to be underneath that, otherwise you won't be able to submit that information. But they don't necessarily have to be verbose in order to get the point across. I will say this grant application is not designed necessarily for grant writers. It's designed for people who engage this work from the point of view of the spiritual leaders, the people invested in the community. We've tried really hard to make the questions accessible in that way so that we get the information that we need without you needing the technical knowledge in order to do that. And that's part of the point of holding the webinars too, to bring everyone, to bring folk up to the starting line at the same place, so that we give as much information as possible. So they don't have to be long. To answer the questions will help us. The questions are designed so that we have the information that we need in order to support as best we can, or put applications in relationship with other folk who might be able to support you better, whether it's relational or beyond. The actual application is available on our website, and it's at ucc.org/grow-your-church. It's in my email signature all over the place, and we're going to put it in the chat box as well. And it's done through the program Smarter Select, which means that you have to create an account in order to apply. And I will make a note that the deadline for the application is September 7th, and I think it's at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And if you, each application has 2 or 3 references. 2 references if you're engaging your conference staff. One of the references is conference, associate conference minister or conference minister, and somebody who would be directly impacted by your ministry. Or if you are not yet connected entirely into the conference, then the references reflect mentors, leaders, and how you're connected to the UCC. So if you're connected to a local congregation and the accountability structure is set up there, that person is one of the references and can specify how that accountability is held. The references must be in before September 7th at 5 o'clock Eastern time. So that's part of why at the front end of all of this, we suggest that you're in conversation with your references now, that, the conference staff is not hearing of your ministry or project for the first time a week before the deadline, that they have ample time to familiarize themselves with what you're doing and where you're hoping to go. Because even if you do not receive the CASA grant, the conference is still a resource, and we are still a resource to help get you to actualizing where you hope to be. Yeah, Susan. I think we're hitting it at the same time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello, Roberto. I have a question. I am with Worcester Fellowship in Worcester, Mass, and we are an outdoor church. Our congregation are the homeless and at-risk community in Worcester. We, over the last year, our pastor and another key pastor left for other adventures, and we are in search. We're hoping the search will be completed and we have someone in place in late August. We are in UCC standing. I'm going to go to my conference minister for support and assistance. However, because of this situation, I'm struggling with what to do. If the board should work on this as a board, knowing that we're going to have someone in place soon, what are your thoughts? What are your suggestions?
That's tricky. In the past, the grants are attached to the spiritual leader. So if a pastor leaves if the spiritual leader leaves the project, mm-hmm. the grant ends.
Yes.
So it's tricky. If you have a spiritual leader by August, great. You may engage that person in the process of applying for a grant, but it would be attached to that spiritual leader. Hold on, I'm thinking.
And you can get back to me too. I don't want to put you on the spot either, but
Yeah.
if you've
Let
got
me-
thoughts about it, that would be glorious.
Yeah.
Especially where, you know, our congregation is the homeless community, and
Sure.
we, you know, we basically survive on grants and gifts that come along the way. So we're in an odd position.
Yeah. For that, I would want to be in conversation with the conference staff as well.
Yes.
Maybe let me connect with them and get back to you. And so I'll call Dawn.
Right. Okay. I was going to do the same after I sat through this, but maybe I will let you make that step first, if you don't mind. And then we can hook up.
Sure. And then I will say for projects that the sustainability plan is grants and gifts, it's complicated because we have a limited amount of resources at the national setting, so that it doesn't negate the granting, but you do want to be really clear in the application about your sustainability plan.
Yes.
So, you know, however that, even if it is, you know, I mean, I'm just like, I'm extroverting this out. I'm going to be very honest about that. Like, but if it is like, we're going to hold a huge fundraiser in the community, then that's a way in which that impact goes beyond, beyond and into the community or something like that. You know, how that it's sustainable beyond this grant for any application is a question that we're thinking of. If it's meant to be a project that is sustaining. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So we have about 25 minutes left, and I just want to invite you into any final further questions, or we can end with blessing and prayer.
I did have another question, if that's okay. I don't want to bump the line here, but we're in a little bit of a different situation. I direct the Center for Spirituality and Nature. Our brand new Church of the Wild is a program of the center. Our spiritual leader is Sarah Anders, as I mentioned a moment ago, who is an ordained UCC pastor. We're in a four-way covenant with the conference, with Sarah's home church, with Sarah, and with us.
Sure.
Is that sufficient connection to the UCC church? Unfortunately, she couldn't be on the call today, so I'm a Methodist, so bear with me.
Yeah.
Is that a sufficient connection to the UCC church?
Yep. How I'm thinking about the application. The application is asking for how that accountability is spelled out. But if you're in the context, so in the United Church of Christ, we hold new church starts and every conference, like many things, does this differently, but new church starts or new communities that are in development are put in the data hub as what's known as Schedule 4. And that kind of signifies something new. It sounds like, Beth, if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm interpreting that you're wanting to do something that is new in that, and that it will be led by the UCC pastor. Is she also serving another congregation?
No, she's not. And so this is a completely independent entity under the auspices of our 501c3, the Center for Spirituality and Nature. But we are just about to finalize this four-way covenant. We've been meeting for about 3 months and quite with big numbers. I don't know what's going on exactly, but it's working and it's happening. But Sarah is very much our spiritual leader. So that's enough of an official UCC connection.
Yeah, you got the conference involved. So, you know, I imagine there are people there who can speak to what you're doing, and be a reference for that. So that's great.
Yeah, it's not a church start per se, because it's a program of our center, but Sarah's got her bona fides.
Yeah,
Thank you.
One of the things that is true about this, well, that feels true in my experience from people doing all sorts of things all around the country, is that the language that we have for the movement of the gospel in the world sometimes doesn't fit. So when you say it's not necessarily a church start, that language doesn't necessarily fit, and we're trying to figure out how we partner with the movement of spirituality and and Christ in the world in new ways, which is, it's hard. Yeah.
Thanks.
Barbara asks via chat, is there a chance we can get a copy of an old grant application redacted to help us to see the whole picture? Probably not. Because the application has changed from year to year, we're seeking new and different things. So, yeah.
What's new in the UCC?
Yeah, the best, for what Jen said, the best picture of that is in the report at ucc.org/what's new. Applications are due. How long is the evaluation process? 797. When should we hear? Our goal is to have the decisions made by the end of October and word out to folk by mid-November. And then another question about metrics. Some things can be measured are easy. How many people participated in programs, but real goals have to do with qualitative things, depth of experience. Our project has to do with connecting public advocacy to spiritual life. So is your question about creative metrics, like specifically for that project? If that, I'm gonna move as though that is. So if that's the case, I would imagine you can bring together the people who are working on it and ask that question. How do we know we've made a difference? If we want to engage the work today and we want to engage the work a year from today, how will we know we've made a difference? Sometimes it is quantifiable and sometimes it's not. So it could be as simple as we're going to develop a survey, send it out to our constituents, and help make that in such a way that you can assess what you're doing. So it may be something like that, but to lean on the wisdom of the folk who are involved in it with you. You know, even if the question is, how do you know you've made a difference? The small will help inspire the all, you know, in terms of leaning into what is and what can be. There's a question in the chat. The grant match can happen. The grant match can happen. And yeah, the grant match is, we anticipate the grant match will happen after the application. We anticipate that the matching grant will happen after you've received it and then in the grant period. So you don't have to have a structure of matching set up before you apply. I mean, you can have some idea of that to think through your own sustainability of the project. That happens afterwards. So there's a process. If you receive the grant, we'll send out guidelines on that. If you are interested in looking at a snapshot of what those guidelines are this year, we may edit them slightly for the next year. We can include that document in this, in the email that's going to go out after this. It'll help you understand how to think that through, or how we're looking for it matching. And then to go back up to the question above, would a tiered listening project uncover how a project has made a difference? It could. It could. I encourage you to check out the Be the Church strategic visioning guide for these questions. It goes into a lot of how you think about metrics there. So it's at ucc.org/bethechurch. And you can think about metrics in that way. All right. So it's about quarter of. Seeing no immediate questions and no one flailing at me to come back. I want to bless you and the work that you're doing. That it is a complicated and difficult time to do the work of church and to engage the gospel and the people that we serve. And folk who are considering new things or out on the, out in front, seeking and grasping language we don't yet know how to hold are in the midst of it and doing it beautifully. I hope that that God is with you even as you do the application, that Christ walks beside you, knowing that your work is the gospel in the world, and that the Spirit uplifts and surrounds you for any outcome of this process, knowing that you are held and supported along the way and in relationship with other people seeking to build a just world for all. So be blessed and reach out if you have any further questions. And I'm grateful for the grant of your attention. So thank you very much.
Chris?
Yes.
This is Ann Troy again.
Sure.
Could we set a time to talk?
Yep, if you email me, I will send you a way to do that.
Well,
awesome. Okay. Can she head out? Awesome. All right, cheers everyone. We're gonna end the meeting. I got that all. Okay. So let's see, we got that. Hi, Jason. Are you there? He's still muted. He might be like doing a bunch of things. Okay, if you're still there, thank you. I'm glad that you were here. We'll connect after. Hey, there you are. You got muted. Now I've unmuted you. Wait, you're still muted. Wait. I won't touch anything. There it goes. That was me. Sorry. Hi.
Hey there. I wish I could see you all. Unfortunately, it's totally blank on my screen, so I'm just guessing at what's going on here.
Really? How?
Let me try and see if I can get back to it. It's just I have a brand new laptop because mine got smashed last week, so.
Right, you were saying that. Oh.
But I think I've got you back on now. You should be able to see me.
Hold on, let me text Roberto. Come back in. Same room. Okay. He's not here. Oh, yeah, he's at a different place. So he's gonna come back in and we can think through. Cool. In the meantime.
Nice work, by the way.
Thank you. How do you think it went?
I think it was helpful. I made a couple of notes, which I'll send along to you, but I thought particularly the way you handled the question, I think it was from Barbara about, if I just need some money to keep our congregation going, and you attach that right to theory of change, that I think is super helpful to people.
Yeah.
I sense a lot of blurriness in that in a lot of the applications that we read, and trying to be really upfront about that seems like a part of the answer to the is this new or renewing thing, which is another piece I thought of that might be helpful to have when someday we all have free time, some small vignettes of examples of like, this is not something, this is, with the caveat that you're never going to be able to pin it down, but at least here's some examples and maybe you can see yourself in them.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We can do that. And I don't necessarily think that's even a complicated one to like draw up some, like I know Mesa does in the manual in ministry, Mesa does like, crap, what are they called? Vignettes. I know you just said vignettes, but I can't remember. Like, no.
Case studies.
Case study. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. But like one of the things that like, yeah. So I know Mesa does that. Oh, we're still recording.